Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Chinyarem Chibondo, and I am bringing in the initial post for Group 5 for the Seedman's coercion and its fallout text. And this week we are reviewing chapter 1 and chapter 16 of the text. Chapter 1's title is This Coercive World, where Seedman lets us know that we are living in a coercive world where everyone follows a given pattern, and that when you fall short of following that directive, that you will receive consequences for it, and that the environment coerces us to behave properly or in an appropriate way in order for us to avoid or escape punishment. He also goes ahead to tell us that in as much as warnings are perceived as coercive, that they are for our well-being, and that adhering to these warnings or threats are of positive impacts on us, and that we should also know that coercion is not the only way that appropriate behavior can be derived, but that we can also let the subject or the individual know the benefits of not engaging inappropriately. That is, that we should let the individual know that these are the benefits of behaving properly, that the individuals can be encouraged to engage in activities that will result in a beneficial consequence, that people should be taught what to do instead of being threatened on what if they do not do, they will be punished for. Well, there's a subtopic on the chapter 1, which is the hostile environment, which explains that coercion takes an important part in our daily interaction with people in our physical environment, and that the physical environment, for example, continuously, threatens us with weather conditions, and that we constantly try to protect ourselves or try to, go be ahead of the physical environment. But that the intent cannot be credited to nature, as nature does not tell us explicitly the repercussions of not of its consequences. Rather, because of the past experiences or the prior experiences that we have had or we have had with weather conditions, it helps us to prepare better for the needful in case of very severe weather conditions. Well, it also goes on to tell us in that same subsection that we are faced with threats from our internal environment, and that in order to escape these threats, we use drugs. And at the end of the day, we find out that we are hooked up on these drugs, and we invariably lose our ability to allow nature take its due course, which invariably leads to us paying very high insurance and medical bills. And that being free from nature's coercion could threaten the very existence of the society. Also, that expressions of religion show coercion from the environment, and that judgments on our social values and practices are perceived to be passed by supreme beings. That environmental coercion has now become a part of our language, that our own conduct or behavior can be reported, that inasmuch as we boast of our supremacy over nature, we are still submissive to it even when we are not conscious of it. The second subtopic under the chapter 1 is the hostile community, which tells us that physical coercion is accountable for acquiring social coercion as an important aspect of life, and that one of the teaching techniques recommended for individuals with disabilities is punishment. That people have the opinion that when punishment is not involved, that that the principle of normalization is not adhered to. And what do we mean by normalization? That is anything that is done the normal way as it relates to everybody, regardless of whether you have a disability or not, and that we adapt to coercion. Coercion nature presents to us. He also goes on to tell us that when we engage in behavior that prevents us from being prey to criminals, that is social coercion, because these criminals use social coercion to manipulate us and, part away with our valuables, so that most times we take precautions to defend ourselves. That even in the school system, where students are threatened with failure if they do not read, that instead that these students could be told the benefits of reading rather than be told the punishment for not reading or the consequences for not reading. And in so many ways we are influenced, and we influence other people as we apply coercion as a means of getting desired results from people. We also have family coercion, which begins very early in infants. Infants want to explore, they want to move around, they want to know what everything is, but parents want to set a standard by coercing this infant on what to do, where to go, and what not. So infants are exposed to coercion very early. And it will be very difficult to imagine life without environmental coercion and social coercion. At the end of the chapter, Seidman expresses his view about coercion control, being used as a therapeutic means. Now we go over to chapter 16, which has the title, Is There Any Other Way? So in this chapter 16, Seidman looks at negative reinforcement and punishment as major contributors to the problems that we have or we are facing in the society. He sees coercion to be convincing because we have instant success when we apply it, but that we fail to see or realize its side effects, which appear after some time, thereby defeating the success we thought we had made. That is, coercive solutions are only for a short run. It's also evident in chapter 16 that coercive control has made us believe that punishment and threat are natural and unavoidable. So individuals seek not to be controlled in any way. Because behavioral control is misunderstood, that the society has failed to investigate other alternatives or options to coercion, and that our behavior is shaped by heredity, biology, people, and place, and that we cannot choose between coercive control and no control at all. So Seidman also goes on to express that once we know that the option for no control does not exist, this then gives us room to look up other options, like the kind of control we want, what controls are available, do we put in place a coercive or a non-coercive social environment, can we influence or control others through punishment and negative reinforcement, or should it be through positive reinforcement? And we know that these are all instruments for behavioral control. So both positive and negative reinforcement strengthen behavior. But the difference is that for positive reinforcement, it gives us satisfaction, while for negative reinforcement, we have the feeling of relief, while punishment leaves us with what we want or what we don't want. So Seidman goes on to tell us that punishment and negative reinforcement are foundations for coercive control. However, that appropriate behavior can be taught by using positive reinforcement. That instead of justifying coercive control in the name of education, civilization, what have you, that a desired result or an appropriate response can be achieved by using positive reinforcement rather than using punishment and negative reinforcement, thereby reducing the side effects of coercion. And that this is the very practical technique of behavior management that is not coercive, that is using positive reinforcement. So Seidman proposes a guiding principle that positive reinforcement is effective and that coercion is not a good idea. That while interacting with each other, it is better to positively reinforce something than to punish it. That most often it is the inappropriate behaviors that we often look out for rather than the appropriate behaviors that we can strengthen using positive reinforcement. And that if we emphasize on punishment as the only way that behavior can be controlled, that we will be only concentrating on inappropriate behaviors, and that we will not be able to encourage or strengthen individuals to behave properly. That most often parents, ask therapists, what do we do about this behavior? What do we do about this situation? Rather than asking or rather than finding out how to encourage or develop appropriate behaviors for their wards or children. So the physical and social environment presents or threatens us with circumstances which we try to avoid or escape, and that we can begin with small steps and gradually we move to broader problems when trying to manage and change behavior. And it goes on also to talk about the language that we use for warnings and signals. He says that our language has many words that function as warnings or signals or warning signals, but that the word no summarizes them all, and that no allows us to avoid aversive events, and that in considering coercion, that we recognize that the avoidance and escape are its basic elements. That no functions as a warning signal because it has been previously conditioned with punishment, but no can be applied or employed as a non-coercive word rather than a coercive word. Thank you so much for listening to this presentation. I hope you enjoyed watching. Thank you.